next item on the agenda, Ms. Demirel's report on reducing inequalities with special focus on in-work poverty. 6 minutes for the rapporteur.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, President. Honourable members. The EU. Is it a place of prosperity? Yes, the EU is one of the wealthiest regions in the world. We have huge wealth concentrated here. However, 1 in 5 Europeans, some 95 million people, are threatened by poverty. The old, the young, those in employment are poor, have a life of poverty. Barely 6% of EU citizens is actually facing extreme poverty. And yet we had the pledge that by 2020 the number of people at risk of poverty would be reduced by 20 million. We have missed that EU target. We see inequality in the EU within and between member states growing. The social consequences of the COVID pandemic will also hit hard. It is already clear that the gap between rich and poor will grow. For that reason alone, we need urgent action, not tomorrow. We needed action yesterday. Across Europe, we need minimum standards. We need strong social security systems in member states. We need wages and income that allow for decent living. Honourable members, a few years ago, the Director General of the ILO said that work was the best way to combat poverty, but that is no longer true for everyone today. Just imagine 1 in 10 job seekers in the EU live in poor households. According to official definitions, we see people threatened by relative poverty if they earn 60% of the median wage. In barely any member state where you have a statutory minimum wage are the people above the poverty threshold. Those who work are threatened by poverty, and yet they should be able to live a decent life, earn a decent wage. They struggle to build up assets. So we need a clear, ambitious minimum wage initiative. We can have statutory minimum wages, but what if those wages, those minimum wages, don't even protect people against poverty? We are seeing more precarious employment, limited contracts, part-time work, gig platform work. We're seeing solo self-employed, bogus self-employment, privatisation, liberalisation. And so we're seeing wages being undercut, driven downwards. That is the case across the European Union. We're seeing collective bargaining and trade unions eroded. This is leading to all wages being driven down. In 14 member states across the EU, 1 in 2 workers is employed without a collective agreement, and that generally leads to worse wages, worse employment conditions and less job security. Now, we've seen this during the crisis. Agency workers, mini jobs, those without a proper contract. Those were the first people jettisoned. They lost their jobs first. We need to be clear that there should be social conditions throughout the European Union. Large companies, multinationals, have reaped in billions during the crisis. They have been salvaged, and yet workers are being sacrificed, workers are being let go, and shareholders are being rewarded. That is unacceptable. It's a crisis for some, but it leads to profits for others. 75% of Europeans say that they are in a worse financial position than before COVID hit. That emerged from a new Oxfam study, and yet the 10 wealthiest people in the world saw their assets increase by 500 billion. Colleagues, my report deals with this issue and many others. We have some 73 recitals, 112 paragraphs. A number of tangible proposals are set out. We want European Social Security number, access to trade unions, protection against discrimination. And we want to gradually get rid of 0 hours contracts. We want an initiative for a minimum income. We want a child guarantee and an ambitious minimum wage. We should not allow social requirements to be sacrificed on the altar of the internal market. Commissioner Schmit, honourable members, it is high time that we take action to ensure a life free of poverty, a decent life for all. They should be protected against precarious employment. They should enjoy sound working conditions and social security in all member states in Europe. I would like to thank you for the committed cooperation with shadow rapporteurs, and I look forward to the discussions here with you today.
Thank you, Ms. Demirel. Commissioner Schmit for the Commission.
Dear members of the Parliament, yes, it is more important than ever to speak about inequalities. So I would like, Ihnen meinen Dank auszusprechen, liebe Berichterstatterin, für Ihren Bericht und auch.
I would like to thank you, Rapporteur, for your report and thank the EMPL Committee and all the shadows.
While unemployment was declining, income inequality did not follow the same trend. In the EU, the income of the richest 20% was 5 times higher than that of the poorest. This afternoon, Madame Lagarde was here to address this Parliament, and she, when she was at the IMF, put inequality as a major challenge for our societies. And recently she said, I quote her, "The bittersweet reality is that despite economic growth, there are still far too many people who are left out." Yes, the income share of the lower 40% earners has stagnated for many years, even in periods of economic growth. Equal access to opportunities remains a challenge, especially for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. And as President von der Leyen has put it in her political guidelines, we need equality for all and equality in all of its senses. The main social fallout of the COVID-19 crisis is still ahead of us. Unemployment can be expected to further increase, and poverty and inequality are likely to follow the same path. And therefore, the crisis response needs to tackle inequality and poverty, both in terms of policy and funding. And now, this has to happen now. In this regard, adequate, sustainable, fair and inclusive social protection systems play a crucial role. They help cushion the impact of a crisis and contribute decisively to the resilience of our societies. Reinforced support is needed to address youth unemployment, as the crisis led to an increase in the rates of young people, not in employment, education and training. But this crisis has plunged a great number of young people in a really dramatic situation. They are experiencing real poverty and exclusion with a detrimental psychological impact. Students who have lost their jobs to pay for their studies, the young who worked in the most impacted sectors like tourism or hospitality, those with precarious jobs who were the first to be unemployed, but also all the young performers in creative activities, the artists, the musicians, actors. They suffer enormously, having no income and often no possibility to pursue their creative activity. We have to show solidarity with these young if we do not want again a lost generation, or worse, a desperate generation. Gender gaps in employment and pay were stagnating before the crisis and are now at risk of widening, yes. Women's overrepresentation in lower paid sectors and occupations, the frontline workers, made them particularly vulnerable. Closed schools and reduced services did not help balance caring responsibility between men and women. As rightly pointed out in the report, in-work poverty strips work of the basic purpose of providing a decent life. In-work poverty was already high on our agenda before the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis. We saw the last recovery did not reach all workers to the same extent. And we are committed to Principle 6 of the Pillar of Social Rights. I quote, "In-work poverty shall be prevented." And this means also that we have to combat precarious work forms. Providing jobs that pay an adequate wage is essential to guarantee adequate working and living conditions for workers and their families, reduce wage inequalities and build fair and resilient economies. Minimum wages play an important role in this context. Adequate minimum wages. Still too many workers are not protected by adequate minimum wages in the EU. This also contributes to higher gender pay gaps. Our proposal for a directive on adequate minimum wages is now in the hands of co-legislators, and we hope for a speedy adoption. Inspired by the principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights, our proposal is ambitious and balanced and fully respects the specificities of national systems. What we need is adequate minimum wages and better coverage by collective agreements. These are the best ways to combat in-work poverty and poverty at large. The fight against inequality and poverty will be an essential part of the action plan to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights. In December, this House has adopted a comprehensive resolution on a strong social Europe for just transitions. This is an important contribution to the action plan and a successful Porto summit. The Commission has already presented important initiatives in this context: adequate minimum wages and collective bargaining, the SURE instrument, the youth employment support package to prevent another lost generation, skills, we just debated it, guidelines on seasonal workers. They are not only very much exposed to the pandemic, but they suffer also from bad working and living conditions. The fight against poverty and inequality will take centre stage. The action plan will include proposals which the European Parliament has been calling for since years, such as child guarantee. The Council conclusions of the 9th of September 2020 invited the Commission to make a proposal on minimum income, given the number of people without income due to the crisis. And it is indeed time to review the Council recommendation from 1992. We need common criteria concerning the fight against inequality, because inequality cannot be won by action at EU level alone. It requires member states, regions, local authorities, social partners and civil society to actively work on the implementation of the Pillar of Principles, including by looking more at the distributional impacts of policies. The next multiannual financial framework and the Next Generation EU can support the right policies. In the MFF, the European Social Fund Plus will be entirely dedicated to employment, education and social measures. The preparation of the national recovery and resilience plans provide member states with ample opportunities to support economic and social upward convergence. It is absolutely true that rising income inequality is the defining challenge of our time, as former President Obama put it some years ago. As this crisis has even amplified this challenge, it is urgent to act. Talking of competitiveness and growth does not make much sense, as Madame Lagarde said, for people whose work does not pay, as they do not actually enjoy that prosperity to which they finally contribute. Prosperity for all has been a major promise of Europe. Let's be up to this promise. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.